Mark Cuban has been accused of racial discrimination and sweeping a threat of violence against African Americans under the rug. Michelle Newsom and her attorney announced on WBAP they have filed a request for a deposition against Cuban. Newsom said she was consistently harassed by coworkers for being a black woman, referencing a time she was told she was only hired because of affirmative action. In a sworn affidavit, another employee claims he reported finding a noose in an IT closet near Cuban's suite back in 2011, and when he reported it to his supervisor, Cuban removed the noose, threw it away, and did not apologize and just sent a company-wide message about the incident. Things just keep getting worse for Mark Cuban, not looking good at this point. Max, is the damage irreparable?
No, but that depends. First, let me say it's very troubling, this kind of accusation. The third rail of American life, at least it was until recently in our national politics, but in polite society anyway, are these kind of accusations involving sexual and racial issues in the workplace and gender discrimination in the workplace. This should still be in polite society the third rail of American life. And there's been an accumulation of accusation and suspicion around Mark Cuban. And the piling up of negative stories undoubtedly has a negative effect on public perception. But Stephen A., the reason I say it depends is this. It is not irreparable well, let's put it this way. The reason there's a negative perception is because even if these things aren't proven, at this point, much of this is hearsay, the idea out there is where there's smoke, there's fire. Why suddenly this deluge of negative stories attached to Mark Cuban? And if the answer to that is something that we can't detect right now, some other plausible explanation, then he can repair his reputation after this. If, however, there is actually fire there, it will burn him up.
Well, I can't disagree with that. The deluge of negativity that's been aimed in his direction over the last few months is incredibly alarming. There's no doubt about that. Those of us who cover the NBA, like I have, certainly are inclined to give him the benefit of the doubt. But there's no ignoring some of the stuff that has come down the pike. When you hear about racial discrimination, we also heard about stuff that was going on with the Dermot Ushery, the former president for the Dallas Mavericks, and how Mark Cuban may have been complicit in allowing him to stay on board and ignoring the concerns of subordinates that happen to work within the organization. When a woman comes out and says that the locker room with the players was more safe than the administrative environment, you know that's something that you just don't hear stuff like that. Being around players in a locker room, young men who are playing the game of basketball, was more safe and comforting and respectful than the administrative and business environment of a franchise. That's an incredibly alarming thing to have said about your organization. This incident with the noose, I find myself sitting there looking at that and saying, well, what was he supposed to do? He got it, he threw it in the garbage. Did you identify who left the noose? Did he know who left the noose? What exactly was he supposed to do with that, other than to try and find out who put the noose up there? If he doesn't know, that would be different. So again, there's a lot to investigate with that particular situation. But I think ultimately what's inescapable is the connection to these latest stories combined with Mark Cuban's position on the whole Donald Sterling matter. Remember, where owner Les Alexander and for the Houston Rockets and Cleveland Cavaliers owner Dan Gilbert and others found Donald Sterling's remark reprehensible and wanted him pushed out of the league and wanted a zero tolerance policy implemented by the league and what have you, even though Mark Cuban was definitely vehement and emphatic in his assertions of how disgusting Donald Sterling's rhetoric was with that little tape that he had with his girlfriend and his mistress, rather, and he was talking about Magic Johnson too. Even though Mark Cuban spoke out against that, Mark Cuban was also the person on the record saying it was a very, very slippery slope to take away ownership from this man and force him to relinquish ownership as an NBA owner just because of his personal views.
Question.
So in other words, Mark Cuban being connected to all of that was not a good look for him, particularly when you take these incidences that he's been accused of as of late and throw it all on top of it.
What I'm inferring from what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is that, or are you saying that stance by Mark Cuban suggests maybe that he felt that there would be some grounds to take away his franchise at some point, and so he defended an owner who found himself in some hot water because he realized his own behavior could land him in hot water one day?
Well, I'm saying in part, some people can look at it that way, but the other thing is that the fact that he did not believe Donald Sterling's comments necessarily warranted expulsion from the league as an owner. He stood alone in that position. Now, it never came to a vote,
Publicly,
if you recall,
right.
because you never came to a vote. Well, it never came to a vote because the day before the vote from the Board of Governors, which consists of the league owners, would have taken place, Shelley Sterling decided to sell a team to Steve Ballmer for $2 billion. So because of that, we never knew publicly what position each owner had taken. But nobody forgot that Mark Cuban was on the record talking about what a slippery slope it was, because there were folks out there who felt his stance should have been just as strong as the commissioner and the other owners.